Sources. Whenever asserting anything about a field or an event, such as history, we should have evidence that helps us arrive at or support our conclusion or theory. Sources are always important to have, but we also have to understand the reliability of the source, its strengths, as well as its weaknesses. For example, a source from the time of the event is more reliable than a source from years after the event. For written sources, the author is just as important. The author may have biases, such as when reviewing the works by Bede, we should have in mind that he was a Roman Catholic as well as a Northumbrian. In his works, he generally paints Northumbria in a positive light. He has biases against pagans and the other kingdoms that are enemies of Northumbria or have done wrong against Northumbria. We should always rely on the evidence to tell the story rather than our own beliefs. Our objectivity is paramount. When reviewing history, we should understand that our ancestors had different mindsets, beliefs, thoughts and feelings. It is all too easy to judge with hindsight. We should remember it is through our ancestors and our past, whether it is their mistakes or successes, that have got us to where we are today. The Variarchy. This is what I'm using to describe England before the end of the Roman Empire and post-Roman Britannia. Prior to the arrival of the Romans, the British Isles were Celtic in their culture. The Romans arrived in 55 BCE, and from that point, Roman culture began to influence the area that would become England. Traditionally, this period was referred to as the Heptarchy. The word derives from Greek, Heptarchy. This roughly translates to the authority of seven, the rule of seven, and the realm of seven. The term Heptarchy is reluctantly used by modern historians, as it is a largely inaccurate term to use due to the fact that there were more or fewer than 7 kingdoms or realms. The known kingdoms or realms of the Heptarchy era are Bernicia, Deira, East Anglia or East Angles, Essex or East Saxon, Gewisse, Hestinga, Whicher, Kent, Lindsey, Lothian, Magansete, Mercia, Middlesex or Middle Saxons, Northumbria, Pexete, Surrey, Sussex or South Saxons, Tomsete, Viking, York or Jorvik, Wessex or West Saxons, Riocansete. There were dominant kingdoms throughout this era and minor ones, but still, the dominant kingdoms did not amount to 7. What we do know is that the number of kingdoms fluctuated as the dominant kingdoms fought for dominance. Early in the so-called Heptarchy era, the kingdoms of Essex and Sussex lost their independence, and by the late 9th century, only the kingdoms of East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex existed. Nevertheless, the realms eventually fell under the command of Æthelstan to form the Kingdom of England, or Engleland. It is unclear when the term Heptarchy was first applied to the era. However, historians believe that the term may have originated from the 12th century historian Henry of Huntingdon, who wrote the famous book Historia Anglorum. Nonetheless, the term did not become prominent until the late 16th century and early 17th century. The Anglo-Saxons. The Anglo-Saxons were described as the Volkerwanderung, which means wandering people or migration of peoples. According to the 8th century historian Bede in his Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum, the Volkerwanderung, or barbarian invaders, were the Angles, Saxons, and the Jutes. However, archaeological evidence and research evidence demonstrate that the wandering people were more than the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. Evidence states that the Volkerwanderung consisted of the Angles, Saxons, Jutes, the Franks, the Frisians, the Geats, the Wends, and the Vikings. Where did they come from? The Angles came from the southern parts of the Danish peninsula. The Saxons came from northern Germany. The Jutes came from Jutland, which was an area that covered the mainland Denmark and the German state of Schleswig-Holstein. The Franks came from northern France and central Germany. The Frisians came from the area around Holland and Belgium. The Geats came from parts of Sweden and Gotland, which is an island and province of Sweden. The Wends came from the southern Baltic regions. The Vikings came from Scandinavia. What was the extent of the migration? This has long been debated, as there is evidence for mass migration, as well as evidence of a much smaller scale migration. The evidence to suggest that the migration was not as extensive as first believed is the fact that some of the British words survived the migration, coupled with the fact that there is evidence to suggest that the post-Roman British language survived up to the end of the 9th century in certain parts of the Midlands. Moreover, the Celtic language had a major influence on the Old English language in terms of style. In European languages, except Celtic and English, the meaning of words is affected by word endings. For example, the Latin word for citizen is civis. In English, we would say of the citizens, whereas in Latin, you would say civium. Latin words contain stems and endings. The stem of civis is civ, and the ending is. The table above demonstrates that English has a non-conjugate verb system, whereas Latin, Old English, German, and French all have conjugated verbs. Additionally, the modern English word for love does not have a stem, as opposed to other languages. The only remnant of conjugation that still exists today is the third person singular, as the word love becomes loves. Another reason is that the evidence for a much smaller scale migration, such as the Celtic British or Brythonic names of places, still exists today. For example, the river Avon comes from the Brythonic word abona, meaning river, which in modern-day Cornish is Avon, and in modern-day Welsh is Afon. Kent either comes from the Brythonic word canto, meaning border, or from the Latin name Cantium. Additionally, the records indicate that the Brythonic called Somerset Cruckton. Nonetheless, the Brythonic language continues to influence today's English, as words such as tor, coombe, and worthy all derive from the Brythonic language. Moreover, the Anglo-Saxons adopted Brythonic words such as Wealth, meaning foreigner, stranger, or harrow. All this is evidence that the Brythonic were not wiped out by the migration. However, as the Anglo-Saxons became dominant, the Brythonic naturally became absorbed into the Anglo-Saxon culture. To a degree, counter the argument for a small-scale migration is a genetic evidence study conducted in 2002 by the University College of London, which stated that after studying Y chromosomes along with mitochondrial deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, it was highly probable that a large-scale Anglo-Saxon migration had occurred in central and eastern England. The following year, studies showed that it was highly probable that a small-scale Anglo-Saxon migration had occurred in the other areas of England. Moreover, the evidence states that the Anglo-Saxon migrants did not wipe out the population, but integrated into the Brythonic societies, as well as supplanting the Brythonic culture. This assertion is reached as all areas of the British Isles population contain Brythonic or pre-Anglo-Saxon genetics, coupled with the fact that archaeologists have discovered Celtic artifacts in later years after the Anglo-Saxon migration supposedly wiped them out.